You don't feel guilty by mistake. You feel guilty because you were rewarded for disappearing. You were conditioned to believe your needs are a burden long before you ever had the language to explain it. It didn't happen through loud moments or dramatic scenes. Most of it was quiet, subtle, and repeated, just enough times that it carved itself into your identity. Maybe it was the sigh someone let out when you asked for help. Maybe it was the irritated look when you expressed disappointment. Maybe it was the way you were praised for being low maintenance, as if having needs made you difficult to love. You learned early that attention came when you played small, and conflict came when you asked for something. So your brain made a simple equation: needing equals losing, wanting equals trouble, and taking up space equals danger. The mind doesn't forget lessons that were taught in the language of survival. As a child, you didn't question the emotional climate around you, you adapted to it. If the environment rewarded silence, you became quiet. If it rewarded self-sacrifice, you learned to disappear. If it punished vulnerability, you learned to hide your feelings so deeply that even you struggle to access them now. You didn't grow up thinking your needs were too much. You grew up around people who convinced you that their comfort mattered more than your well-being. And now, as an adult, that conditioning still pulls the strings. The moment you try to prioritize yourself, even in small ways, your body reacts like you're breaking a rule that once protected you. It triggers guilt, not because you're wrong, but because you're violating an old survival pattern. You're not just choosing yourself, you're going against everything you were taught to do to stay safe. That's why the guilt feels so strong. It isn't logical, it's learned, and learned fear always feels like truth until you examine it. This guilt shows up in your life in such subtle ways that you barely notice the pattern. When someone asks you for a favor, your yes comes out faster than your boundaries. When you try to rest, you feel like you're disappointing someone. When you finally say no, you replay the conversation in your head, wondering if you sounded rude or selfish. You overthink even the smallest act of self-preservation because you were trained to believe it harms others. That's the invisible script running in the background. If you put yourself first, someone else will suffer. And people who grew up giving too much always imagine the worst consequences for choosing themselves. Not because they're dramatic, but because that's all they've ever known. What makes this pattern even darker is how deeply it intertwines with your identity. You don't just think your needs are inconvenient, you think you are. You apologize for existing. You soften your tone, shrink your desires, rewrite your personality just to avoid the discomfort of someone's disappointment. You call it kindness or empathy, but often it's fear. Fear of being rejected, fear of being criticized, fear of being seen as demanding, fear of being abandoned for having a pulse. Because at some point, someone made you believe you had to earn love by being easy, quiet, selfless. But here's the truth. Your past never wanted you to discover. Needing something doesn't make you a burden. Having limits doesn't make you unlovable. And putting yourself first doesn't make you selfish. It makes you human. The guilt you feel is not a moral compass, it's a scar. And scars don't define you, they simply show where you learned to survive. When you finally understand that, the guilt loses its power. You were never the burden. You were just taught to feel like one. You were rewarded for self-sacrifice in ways that shaped your entire identity without you ever noticing it happen. It wasn't always overt praise. Sometimes it was the quiet approval in someone's eyes when you held everything together without complaining. Sometimes it was the way people depended on you, leaned on you, expected you to be the one who never breaks. You became the person who absorbs everyone else's storms but hides your own. The reliable one, the strong one, the one who doesn't need anything back. And slowly, without any conscious decision, you learned that your value came from how much of yourself you could give away. People loved you for what you did for them, not for what you needed. They admired your resilience more than your humanity. You were celebrated for your tolerance, your patience, your emotional labor, your ability to function even when you were falling apart on the inside. And praise, especially when you're young, becomes a kind of currency. You chase it. You repeat the behavior that earns it. You start to believe that the only way to be loved is to be useful. So you gave more, you helped more, you smiled harder, you carried things alone. And every time someone told you that you were so understanding, so mature, so easy to be around, it locked the pattern deeper into your psyche. You learned to take pride in being the one who doesn't complain, the one who always shows up, the one who fixes everything. But underneath that pride lived a quieter truth. You were terrified that if you ever stopped giving, people would stop staying. And this is where the guilt begins its work, because now when you even think about putting yourself first, it feels like a betrayal, like you're breaking a contract you never signed, but somehow still feel bound to. Your mind remembers all the praise you got when you said yes, and all the tension you avoided by never saying no. It remembers how loved, needed, or appreciated you felt when you put others above yourself. So the moment you choose yourself, your body interprets it as a loss, a threat, a risk. That's why prioritizing your own needs feels wrong, not because it is wrong, but because it goes against the role you were conditioned to play. You didn't become selfless by nature, you became selfless by training. You were shaped into someone who equates self-respect with the possibility of disappointing others. You learned to fear the silence that might follow a boundary, the withdrawal that might follow a no, the shift in someone's tone when you put your own needs on the table. And the darkest part is that people around you often benefited from this version of you. They relied on your giving, your patience, your emotional labor, your willingness to bend. They liked you better when you were convenient. They liked you better when your needs didn't interrupt theirs. And even now, the guilt that rises inside you isn't just internal, it's the echo of every person who felt more comfortable when you put yourself last. So when you try to choose yourself as an adult, the discomfort hits you like a warning siren, not because you're being selfish, but because you're breaking a pattern that once defined your worth. You're rewriting a role that others depended on. You're challenging the version of you that people praised because it made their lives easier. But you're allowed to stop auditioning for the part of the one who never needs anything. You're allowed to exist without earning your place. You're allowed to be loved without bleeding for it. The truth is simple and unsettling. They praised your self-sacrifice because it benefited them, not because it healed you. There's something you've probably never said out loud, but you felt it in your bones. The guilt you carry isn't random. It exists because the people around you got comfortable with a version of you that never asked for more. They learned to depend on your silence, your patience, your emotional labor, your willingness to say yes, even when every part of you wanted to say no. And the moment you try to put yourself first, you're not just disrupting your own patterns, you're disrupting theirs. You're breaking a system they quietly built on your compliance. Most people don't admit this, but they like it when someone is predictable. They like it when you always show up, always help, always soften your voice, always bend just a little more than you should. They settle into that convenience the way someone settles into a soft chair. It makes their life easier. It spares them from discomfort, effort, accountability. And so they get used to the idea that you will always be available, always be understanding, always be the one who adjusts. Not because you owe them anything, but because you trained them to expect it. You taught them that you would always choose them over yourself. And when people get used to your overgiving, they stop appreciating it. They start assuming it. They start believing they deserve it. They don't see your exhaustion because you've mastered the art of hiding it. They don't see your boundaries because you never showed them. They don't see your breaking points because you stitched yourself together before anyone could notice the cracks. You became reliable to the point of invisibility. And invisibility is a dangerous kind of loyalty, because once people learn you'll never put yourself first, they never think to put you first either. So when you finally try to change, even in the smallest ways, it creates tension, not always loud but noticeable. The tone shifts, someone's face tightens, someone questions you, guilt trips you, or acts confused by this new version of you. They're not confused, they're inconvenienced. Your boundaries are disrupting the comfort they've built around your lack of boundaries. Your no is taking away benefits they never should have had in the first place. And suddenly you feel the weight of their disappointment, real or imagined, pressing down on you. That's where the guilt hits hardest, not because you're doing something wrong, but because your mind remembers all the past moments where choosing yourself came with a consequence. Maybe someone got angry, maybe someone pulled away, maybe someone made you feel dramatic or ungrateful, or maybe they didn't say anything at all, they just withdrew their warmth. And humans learn quickly, if I want to keep the peace, I have to give myself up. If I want to be loved, I have to be useful. If I want to be accepted, I have to put myself last. That's the psychological trap. You're not afraid of being selfish, you're afraid of losing connection. What makes this even darker is that people rarely admit when they've benefited from your self-abandonment. They don't say, "I liked it better when you had no boundaries." They don't say, "Your exhaustion kept my life running smoothly." They don't say, "Your guilt fed my comfort." Instead, they make you question your own needs, your own choices, your own right to take up space. And that doubt sits in your chest like a weight every time you try to choose yourself. You think the guilt means you're doing something wrong, but really, it just means you're finally doing something different. You are not responsible for how others react to your healing. You are not responsible for maintaining a version of yourself that made everyone else comfortable while quietly destroying you. You do not owe anyone the pieces of yourself you had to break off just to keep them close. The truth is colder than you expect. They weren't upset because you changed. They were upset because you stopped serving them. You grew up inside a psychological double bind that you never had the language to explain. On one side, you were taught that asking for more made you too much. On the other, shrinking yourself made you not enough. No matter what you did, you were wrong in someone's eyes. And when a child grows up trapped between those invisible expectations, they start to believe something dangerous, that their very existence must be carefully managed, softened, controlled, edited. You learn to stay in the middle, never wanting too loudly, never needing too deeply, never occupying too much space. You started to treat yourself like a problem that needed constant correction. Over time, that internal conflict became automatic. You stopped expressing your desires because you feared they would make you seem demanding. You held back your opinions because you didn't want to appear difficult. You minimized your emotions because you thought they were inconvenient. And every time you suppressed a part of yourself, someone praised you for being mature, calm, easy, understanding. They rewarded your invisibility, and you learned to depend on that approval like oxygen. Now, as an adult, the guilt you feel when you prioritize yourself is really the echo of all those mixed messages. When you try to choose something that benefits you, there's a voice inside that whispers you're being dramatic. When you try to set a boundary, another voice tells you you're being cold or selfish. When you try to finally take up more space, a deeper voice warns you that people will withdraw if you stop being convenient. None of these voices belong to you. They belong to the people who shaped your beliefs long before you could fight back. You internalize those old fears so deeply that they feel like instinct. You think you're overreacting, but your mind is only repeating what it learned, that being too visible makes you unlovable, and being too quiet makes you unworthy. So you oscillate between these extremes, afraid of needing too much, afraid of giving too little. You keep adjusting yourself like a dimmer switch, trying to find the level where no one will reject you. And that constant self-monitoring is exhausting. It turns your life into a performance where you're always calculating, always anticipating, always shrinking or softening or silencing yourself to avoid being judged. What makes this cycle even more painful is that it convinces you the guilt is your fault. It makes you believe you're naturally self-critical, naturally sensitive, naturally anxious about disappointing others. But none of that is true. You were trained to feel responsible for other people's comfort. You were conditioned to believe your needs came at a cost. You were taught that taking care of yourself somehow takes something away from everyone else. And conditioning, especially emotional conditioning, doesn't fade just because you're older now. It lingers. It shapes your relationships. It infiltrates your decisions. It convinces you that protecting yourself is a crime. But here's the darkest part. You've become so accustomed to questioning your worth that you don't even notice it happening anymore. You second-guess compliments. You minimize your successes. You hold back happiness because you feel like you haven't earned it. You apologize before you speak. You wait for permission to take care of yourself. You treat your needs like they're optional, even though they're the very thing keeping you alive. That's the psychological trap you were handed, to believe that anything you do for yourself is somehow too much. The truth is, you were never the problem. The problem was the environment that taught you to feel guilty for simply being human. You learned to fear your own voice because someone long ago feared what would happen if you ever used it. But you're older now, stronger now, more aware now. You can rewrite the belief that taught you to treat your existence like a burden. And it all starts here. You were never too much. They were just too little to handle you. Stop apologizing for existing. Stop shrinking for their comfort. You were never theirs to own.